We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Glass Houses. James Callahan gripped the crystal tumbler in his hand, watching his wife, Rebecca, sprawl across their imported Italian leather couch. The diamond necklace he'd given her for their 10th anniversary still adorned her neck, catching the morning light that streamed through the windows. Her wine-stained lips parted slightly as she snored, oblivious to how her drunken confession had just demolished 13 years of marriage. The construction mogul's mind raced through calculations, not of building materials or project timelines, but of destruction. At 42, James had built his empire from nothing, climbing from job sites to boardrooms through sheer force of will. Now, standing in his living room at 7 a.m., he contemplated how to dismantle someone else's world with. Brad was always the one I really wanted. Rebecca's words from hours earlier replayed in his mind. She'd been on her 4th glass of wine, past the point of maintaining her carefully crafted facade. You were just safe. My backup plan. Her laughter had echoed through their custom-designed living room. 13 years, Jimmy, and I never really loved you. James raised the tumbler to his lips, letting the aged scotch burn away the bitter taste of betrayal. His father's voice echoed in his thoughts. Control the battlefield before engaging the enemy. Michael Callahan, former Navy SEAL, had drilled military discipline into his son from an early age. After James's mother died, it had been just the two of them, and those lessons had served him well in business. Now they would serve a different purpose. The sound of heels clicking on marble drew his attention. Maria, their housekeeper, stopped short in the doorway, her eyes widening at the scene before her. Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry I didn't... James held up a hand, his voice steady and cold. It's fine, Maria. Mrs. Callahan had a late night. Please ensure she has aspirin and water when she wakes up. I'll be in my study. In his mahogany-paneled sanctuary, James accessed his computer and pulled up his contacts. The first call went to his head of security, Frank Torres. Frank, I need a full surveillance package on Brad Morrison. Everything, financial records, medical licenses, current address, phone records. And Frank, this stays between us. Understood, boss. Clean and quiet. Next came the banking records. As CEO of Callahan Construction, James had cultivated relationships with every major financial institution in Boston. Rebecca's trust fund, which he'd carefully managed for years, would require special attention. A soft knock interrupted his planning. Emma, their 15-year-old daughter, stood in the doorway, already dressed for school in her Beacon Hill Academy uniform. Dad, is Mom okay? I heard her coming in really late last night. James studied his daughter's face. Rebecca's delicate features, but his own determined jaw and sharp intelligence. The possibility that she might not be his biological child sent a spike of rage through him, but he maintained his composure. Your mother's fine, sweetheart. Just a bit under the weather. Harrison will drive you to school today. Emma lingered, her keen eyes taking in the untouched bed in the adjacent master bedroom, her father's still-pressed clothes from yesterday. Dad, what's really going on? James stood and crossed to his daughter, placing his hands on her shoulders. Nothing you need to worry about right now. Focus on your studies. We'll talk more later. After Emma left, James returned to his computer. A message from Frank already waited in his encrypted email. Morrison took position at Mass General 6 months ago. Cardiothoracic Surgery Department. Notable gambling activity flagged at Mohegan Sun and several offshore sites. More details incoming. The pieces began falling into place. Rebecca's sudden interest in hospital volunteering. Her girls' nights that ran increasingly late. The secret glances at her phone. A text from his construction site manager provided a needed distraction. Crisis at Seaport Project. Need immediate decision. On my way, James replied. He'd built his reputation on hands-on management, and maintaining normalcy was crucial now. Before leaving, he stood in the living room once more. Rebecca had shifted, the diamond necklace now twisted awkwardly around her throat. He remembered the day he'd bought it. $50,000 at Tiffany's, a symbol of their successful marriage. Now it represented something else entirely: collateral. James pulled out his phone and took several photos of his wife passed out on the couch, the wine bottles scattered around her. Evidence, his father would have called it. Documentation for the coming war. At the front door, he gave Maria final instructions. If she asks, tell her I had an early meeting. And Maria? No calls out from the house line today. Phone systems being upgraded. The housekeeper nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd worked for James for 10 years and had likely seen more than she let on. Behind the wheel of his Range Rover, James allowed himself one moment of pure, unrestrained rage. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, and a single, harsh breath escaped through clenched teeth. Then, like his father had taught him, he locked the emotion away and focused on the mission ahead. The job site demanded his attention for several hours, a dispute over structural steel specifications that required his expertise to resolve. He moved through meetings and inspections with mechanical efficiency, his mind simultaneously processing multiple scenarios for what would come next. During a break, he received another email from Frank. Morrison's gambling debts exceed $2 million. Connected to Danny Martinez's operation. Hospital Foundation finances show irregularities. Sending full report by secure courier. James smiled for the first time that day, a sharp expression that made a nearby foreman take an unconscious step back. Brad Morrison had given him the weapon needed for the first strike. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Jimmy, I'm so sorry about last night. Can we talk when you get home? He left it unanswered and called Detective Mira Rodriguez instead. They'd grown up in the same blue-collar neighborhood, and she'd risen to head the Financial Crimes Division through the same relentless drive that had propelled James to success. Mira, need to meet. The usual place, 1 hour. The diner where they met hadn't changed since their childhood. Same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee that could strip paint. Mira slid in across from him, her detective's eyes taking in every detail of his appearance. You look like shit, James. Rebecca's been having an affair. Myra's face hardened. She'd never liked Rebecca, seeing through the socialite's polished veneer to the emptiness beneath. How long? At least 6 months. With Brad Morrison. The surgeon? Jesus. Mira leaned back, processing the implications. What are you planning? James stirred his coffee, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I'm going to take everything from them. Not just money or reputation. Everything. James. Mira glanced around the empty diner. You need to be careful. Your position. I built my company from nothing. I could survive anything. They can't. Mira studied him for a long moment, seeing the cold determination in his eyes. You'll need clean intel. Nothing that comes back to you. That's why I'm here. She nodded slowly. I'll help. But James? Remember Emma. Whatever you do, she needs her father. The mention of Emma sparked another wave of rage, but James channeled it into his planning. I know. She's all that matters now. Back at his office, James began making calls. A city councilman who owed him for some discreet renovations. A bank executive whose daughter had gotten into Harvard thanks to James's alumni connections. The head of the hospital board, whose summer house had been built at a suspicious discount. Each conversation was carefully crafted, planting seeds that would bloom into destruction. By the time he finished, the foundations of Brad Morrison's life had been mined with explosives. All that remained was to light the fuse. Rebecca called 3 more times. He let each one go to voicemail, imagining her growing panic as she tried to remember exactly what she'd revealed in her drunken state. The final email of the day came from his private investigator. DNA testing facilities, discreet and reliable, with same-day results. James stared at the information for a long time before saving it to an encrypted folder. The sun had set by the time he drove home, his plans laid out with the same meticulous attention he gave to his construction projects. Rebecca's BMW was gone from the driveway, probably seeking refuge with her society friends, trying to spin the story her way. Emma sat at the kitchen island, textbooks spread around her, looking up as he entered. Dad, can we talk now? James saw the worry in her eyes, the same determination he felt in his own heart. Whatever the DNA results might show, this was his daughter. She deserved the truth, most of it, anyway. Let's order pizza, he said, shrugging off his jacket. Your favorite place? Over pepperoni and mushroom pizza. James listened as Emma described the changes she'd noticed in her mother's behavior. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the new clothes and sudden interest in fitness. I'm not stupid, Dad, she said finally. I know something's really wrong. James reached across the island and squeezed her hand. No, you're not stupid. You're my daughter, and you deserve better than lies. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The direct question, delivered with such adult composure, made James's chest tighten. Would that upset you? Emma was quiet for a moment, picking at her pizza. I think it would upset me more if you stayed together just for me. I've seen how she treats you, Dad, like you're not good enough for her fancy friends. But you're the one who actually built something. Pride and love warred with the anger in James's heart. Whatever happens, you're my priority. Remember that. Later, alone in his study, James opened the secure files Frank had sent. Brad Morrison's life spread across his screen. Medical school records, gambling debts, hospital finances, private appointments. The man who'd helped destroy his marriage had left himself vulnerable on multiple fronts. A text from Mira lit up his phone. Financial Crimes is opening a quiet investigation into hospital foundation irregularities. Completely unrelated to you, of course. James smiled and poured himself another scotch. The pieces were in motion. Soon, Brad Morrison would learn the cost of taking another man's life for granted. Rebecca would discover that Herb's safe choice had been anything but safe. In the morning, he would begin making arrangements for DNA testing. But tonight, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of betrayal, to let it forge his resolve into something harder and colder than mere revenge. The diamond necklace lay on his desk, retrieved from Rebecca's neck before she'd woken. In the dark of his study, it sparkled with promises of destruction rather than love. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The week following Rebecca's confession unfolded with the precision of a military operation. James moved through his daily routines like an actor performing a well-rehearsed play, while beneath the surface, his investigators pieced together the full extent of Brad and Rebecca's betrayal. Monday morning found him in his corner office downtown, reviewing Frank Torres's latest report. The surveillance photos spread across his desk told a story that made his jaw clench. Rebecca and Brad emerging from a boutique hotel in Back Bay, sharing an intimate lunch at a secluded restaurant, disappearing into an apartment building that didn't match either of their official addresses. The apartment's registered to a shell company, Frank explained, standing at parade rest before James's desk. Morrison's been making payments through an offshore account. Same account shows regular transfers to some interesting characters in Vegas. James studied a particular photo, Rebecca laughing at something Brad had said, her hand resting intimately on his arm. The gambling connections? Danny Martinez runs a high-stakes operation. Morrison's in deep, way beyond a surgeon's salary. He's been making payments, but he's falling behind. And the hospital foundation? Frank placed another folder on the desk. Morrison sits on the board, overseeing charitable donations. Large sums have been moving through accounts he has access to. Our forensic accountant found discrepancies dating back 6 months. James nodded slowly, his mind calculating angles and leverage points. Keep digging. I want everything. After Frank left, James called his bank contact, Jonathan Pierce, at First Boston Trust. John, remember that favor you owe me? Time to collect. I need Rebecca's trust fund frozen. Immediately. James, that's not exactly. Your daughter's Harvard acceptance. The rowing team scholarship. Would be a shame if someone looked too closely at those donations. A heavy silence filled the line. I'll need a reason. Suspicious activity. Possible criminal investigation. Make it official enough to satisfy her family's lawyers. It'll be done by close of business. James ended the call and turned to his computer, accessing the private investigator's portal. The DNA results had arrived that morning. Probability of paternity, 0%. The words should have devastated him. Instead, they crystallized his resolve. Emma might not share his blood, but she shared his spirit. That meant more than genetics. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Callahan? Mrs. Callahan is here to see you. James straightened his tie and squared his shoulders. Send her in. Rebecca swept into the office like a force of nature, designer heels clicking against hardwood, Hermes scarf artfully arranged around her neck, covering the slight bruising from where the diamond necklace had pressed against her throat during her drunken sleep. "Jimmy, we need to talk about what happened." He gestured to a chair without rising. "Do we? I was drunk. I didn't mean to tell the truth." His voice remained calm, almost pleasant. 13 years, Rebecca. Why now? She shifted uncomfortably under his steady gaze. It was just, Brad's back in town, and seeing him brought up old feelings. But it doesn't mean anything. You're my husband. Your safe choice. Your backup plan. James reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a manila envelope. "Tell me about the apartment in Back Bay." The color drained from Rebecca's face. "What?" "Unit 1205, the Grandview. Lovely views of the harbor, I'm told. Though I suppose you and Brad weren't focused on the scenery." "James, I can explain." He held up a hand, silencing her. "Can you explain this too?" He slid the DNA results across the desk. Rebecca's hands trembled as she read the report. "How did you? Does Brad know that Emma is his?" "I never told him." Tears welled in her perfectly made-up eyes. "Please, Jimmy, you can't." "Can't what?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Can't be angry that my wife has been lying to me for 15 years? Can't be furious that the daughter I raised isn't mine? Or can't do anything about it? What are you going to do?" James smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Nothing. Yet. Go home, Rebecca. Enjoy your comfortable life while you can." After she fled his office, James made another call, this time to Detective Rodriguez. The diner was empty when he arrived, save for Mira nursing a cup of coffee in their usual booth. She pushed a file across the table as he sat down. "Morrison's been cooking the hospital's books. We've got enough for a warrant, but my captain wants to build a stronger case before moving." "How long?" "A month, maybe 2. "James." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "What you're planning, it could destroy everything you've built." He stirred his coffee, watching the dark liquid swirl. "They already destroyed everything, Mira. I'm just arranging the funeral. And Emma? What happens when she learns the truth? She's stronger than anyone knows." Like her father, he met Myra's concerned gaze. Her real father. The detective's eyes widened slightly. "You confirmed it?" "This morning. Brad Morrison's been her biological father all along." "Jesus, James." Mira ran a hand through her short dark hair. "That changes things." "No, it doesn't. Emma is my daughter in every way that matters." But Brad and Rebecca? They don't get to walk away from this. Back at his office, James received an urgent message from his contact at the hospital board. Morrison had called an emergency meeting, attempting to explain discrepancies in the Foundation's accounts. The noose was tightening. Chapter 3. Pieces in Motion. James maintained his routine with military discipline as he orchestrated the opening moves of his response. Each morning, he left for work at precisely 7:30 a.m., kissing Emma goodbye as Harrison waited with the car. Each evening, he returned home to share dinner with his daughter, listening to her stories about school, while Rebecca made increasingly transparent excuses for her absences. Mom said she's having dinner with Aunt Caroline again. Emma mentioned one evening, pushing her pasta around the plate. "That's the 3rd time this week." James set down his fork. "Your Aunt Caroline is in Paris until next month." "I know." Emma's voice carried a weight beyond her 15 years. "Dad, I need to show you something." She pulled out her phone and opened a folder of photos. James's hands tightened around his glass as he swiped through them. Rebecca and Brad entering the Grandview apartment building, sharing intimate moments in public, acting like love-struck teenagers rather than middle-aged adulterers. "How long have you been collecting these?" 3 months. Emma's chin lifted defiantly. "I'm not stupid, Dad. I saw how Mom changed when he came back to Boston. The new clothes, the gym membership, the volunteer work at the hospital." James reached across the table and gripped his daughter's hand. "You shouldn't have had to deal with this alone." "I'm a Callahan." She squeezed his hand back. "We handle our problems." The moment crystallized something in James's mind. Emma was his daughter, biology be damned. She had his strength, his strategic mind, his unwavering loyalty. Brad Morrison might have contributed DNA, but James had shaped her character. Later that night, in his study, James received an encrypted email from Frank Torres. Boss, Morrison's getting sloppy. Made contact with Danny Martinez's people at an underground casino. Caught it on video. Martinez isn't happy about the payment schedule. James picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he rarely used. Mr. Callahan. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional. How can my security firm be of service? I need information on Danny Martinez's operation. Specifically, his relationship with Brad Morrison. That could be complicated. Money isn't an issue. A pause. I'll have something for you tomorrow. The next day brought Rebecca home early, her usual polish cracking around the edges. She paced the kitchen as James calmly ate his lunch. The bank won't release my trust fund. Her voice trembled with barely controlled panic. Daddy's lawyers say there's some kind of investigation. How unfortunate. James took another bite of his sandwich. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Did you do this? I'm just a simple contractor, remember? Your safe choice. I hardly understand complex financial matters. I need that money, James. He met her gaze steadily. What for, Rebecca? Hospital volunteering doesn't pay that well. The color drained from her face. What are you? Unit 1205 must have a lovely view. Though the lease seems rather expensive for a part-time surgeon's salary. Rebecca gripped the counter for support. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. James stood, placing his plate in the dishwasher with deliberate care. You should ask Brad about his gambling debts. Danny Martinez isn't known for his patience. How do you know about? She stopped herself, but the damage was done. I know everything, Rebecca. Every lie, secret meeting, dollar he's stolen from the hospital foundation to pay his debts. The only question is, what do you think I'm going to do with that information? She took a step back, seeing her husband clearly for the first time in 13 years. Not the safe choice, but a predator who had been patiently waiting to strike. Jimmy, please. You should go lie down. His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. You look tired. All those late nights must be catching up with you. After she fled upstairs, James checked his messages. The security firm had delivered its report on Danny Martinez. The information surpassed his expectations. Detailed records of Brad's gambling debts, proof of threatening messages, even surveillance photos from the casino. The next piece fell into place that afternoon. Detective Rodriguez called as James was leaving a construction site. We've got Morrison's financial records. The hospital foundation money definitely went through his personal accounts before hitting the offshore ones. My captain's given the green light to move forward with the investigation. How long? We'll start interviewing hospital board members next week. Morrison doesn't know yet, but he will soon. James hung up and made one more call to his contact at the Boston Globe. The reporter had been eager to repay James for keeping certain construction accidents out of the papers years ago. Now, that debt would be settled with a series of explosive articles about financial misconduct at one of Boston's most prestigious hospitals. The foundation was laid. Brad Morrison's carefully constructed life would soon collapse under the weight of his own choices. Rebecca would watch helplessly as her lover imploded, taking her reputation and security with him. But first, James had one more card to play. He found Emma in the library, studying for her biology exam. The irony didn't escape him. How would you feel about spending more time with your grandfather? Emma looked up, surprised. Grandpa Mike? Is he coming to visit? I think it's time he moved back to Boston. James sat beside his daughter. Things might get complicated here soon. Having him around would make me feel better. Because of Mom and Brad? James studied her face. The determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. So much like his own. Yes, your grandfather. He understands complicated situations. Military training. You think we'll need military training? I think we need family we can trust. James pulled out his phone and showed her the DNA test results. There's something you should know. Emma read the report slowly, her hands steady. When she looked up, her eyes were dry. Does this change anything? Only if we let it. She nodded once, decisively. Then we don't let it. You're my dad. Biology doesn't matter. James felt a fierce pride surge through him. Rebecca and Brad could have their affair, their secret apartment, their ill-gotten money. They would never understand what real loyalty meant. That night, as James reviewed the final pieces of his plan, a text arrived from an unknown number. Martinez wants to meet. Neutral ground. Tomorrow. The message represented an unexpected opportunity, but also a risk. Danny Martinez wasn't known for peaceful negotiations. Still, the potential for additional leverage was too tempting to ignore. James sent a single-word reply. Where? The response came immediately. Your choice? He smiled in the darkness of his study. Even Boston's notorious underground casino boss understood the importance of home field advantage. The safe choice wasn't feeling very safe anymore. Chapter 4. Opening Moves. James Callahan sat in his downtown office, watching the morning bustle of Boston's financial district through the vast windows. A month had passed since Rebecca's drunken confession, and now his carefully laid plans were ready to be executed. His computer chimed with an incoming email from his anonymous account. The message contained detailed financial records from Massachusetts General Hospital's charitable foundation, evidence of systematic theft spanning months. With 3 clicks, copies went to the hospital board, the Boston Globe, and the state attorney general's office. Sir? His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Detective Rodriguez is here. Mira strode in, her detective's badge glinting at her hip. It started. The hospital board called an emergency meeting this morning. Brad Morrison's attendance required? He's already there, trying to explain away $2 million in missing donations. Mira perched on the edge of his desk. My team's ready to move once the board files an official complaint. James pulled up another screen showing real-time surveillance of the hospital boardroom. Brad Morrison's normally confident posture had crumbled as he faced the stern faces of Boston's elite medical establishment. Look at him squirm, Mira muttered. He's realizing there's no way to hide the money trail. The cancer research funds were particularly sloppy, James agreed, his voice cold. Danny Martinez must have been pressing hard for payments. Speaking of Martinez, Mira lowered her voice. Word is he's not happy about Morrison using stolen charity money to pay gambling debts. Bad for business when the feds get involved. James's phone buzzed with a text from Frank Torres. Package delivered to Martinez. He's reviewing the evidence now. The package contained proof of Brad's embezzlement, along with documentation of his attempts to play different gambling syndicates against each other. Danny Martinez wouldn't appreciate learning that his prime customer had been negotiating with rival operations. A call from Rebecca interrupted his thoughts. He let it go to voicemail, imagining her panic as she discovered her trust fund access had been frozen. The timing wasn't coincidental. James had ensured the bank's action coincided with the hospital board meeting. His next call came from William Montgomery, Rebecca's father. What the hell is going on, James? The bank's frozen Becky's accounts pending a criminal investigation. Hello, William. I'm afraid I don't handle the family's banking matters anymore. James's voice dripped with false concern. Perhaps you should ask Rebecca about her recent financial activities. Or Brad Morrison's. A sharp intake of breath. Morrison? What does he have to do with this? You might want to read tomorrow's Boston Globe. I hear there's an interesting story breaking about hospital foundation funds and gambling debts. The line went dead. James checked his watch. Right on schedule. William would be calling his country club friends, desperately trying to contain the impending scandal. His office door opened again, this time admitting Frank Torres. Boss, we've got movement at the hospital. Morrison just left the board meeting. He's headed to the Back Bay apartment. And Rebecca? Already there. She got the trust fund notification an hour ago. James stood, straightening his tie. Time to make an appearance, I think. Call Harrison and have him bring the car around. The drive to Back Bay took 15 minutes. James used the time to coordinate with his team. The surveillance photos of Brad and Rebecca entering their love nest would hit social media within the hour, carefully timed to coincide with the first online headlines about the hospital investigation. Unit 1205 at the Grandview was registered to one of Brad's shell companies, an easy trail for investigators to follow. James had another team documenting each time the lovers met there, building a timeline of their affair that would destroy any attempts at denial. You sure about this, boss? Harrison asked as they pulled up to the building. Could get messy. Mess is exactly what we want, Harrison. Some things need to be seen, to be believed. The building security recognized him immediately. James's construction company had renovated the lobby last year. No one questioned his right to be there as he took the elevator to the 12th floor. He could hear the argument before reaching 1205. Brad's voice carried through the door, tight with panic. What do you mean it's frozen? All of it? Everything. Rebecca's voice cracked. The accounts, the cards, even my personal savings. Daddy's lawyers say there's some kind of investigation. This can't be happening. Not now. Martinez is expecting another payment this week. James pressed a small recording device against the door, capturing every word. More evidence for the right moments. Who's Martinez? Rebecca's voice rose higher. Brad, what have you done? Nothing. It's just, I had some gambling debts, but I was handling it. With what money? A pause. The hospital foundation had cash flow flexibility. I was going to pay it back. The foundation? The Children's Cancer Research money? Rebecca's voice turned hysterical. Are you insane? James's phone vibrated. The first Boston Globe article had just gone live. Right on cue, Brad's phone began ringing inside the apartment. Morrison? What? No, that's impossible. The board meeting was confidential. The Globe? What article? James stepped back from the door, his work there done. The recording would make excellent leverage later, but for now, the priority was ensuring his own alibi. He had a lunch meeting scheduled with the mayor, a public appearance that would distance him from the day's events. His phone buzzed again. Eleanor Montgomery, Rebecca's mother, was calling. He answered as he stepped into the elevator. James, darling. Eleanor's socialite polish couldn't quite hide her desperation. There must be some misunderstanding about Rebecca's accounts. I'm afraid not, Eleanor. The bank's compliance department flagged some concerning transactions. They're quite thorough when it comes to potential criminal activity. Criminal? But surely, I understand Brad Morrison's name came up in their investigation. Something about misappropriated hospital funds? Eleanor's sharp gasp told him she'd just seen the news. Oh God, the foundation money? Rebecca wasn't involved in that. Was she? I couldn't say. I'm just a simple contractor, remember? These complex financial matters are beyond me. The elevator reached the lobby. I should go. I'm having lunch with Mayor Collins. Give my best to William. The mention of the mayor was deliberate. The Montgomerys would understand the message. James had powerful friends too, and they'd chosen the wrong man to underestimate. Harrison held the car, door open. Where to, boss? La Maison. I believe we're about to have a very productive lunch with His Honor. As they drove, James checked his messages. The surveillance photos had hit social media, spreading through Boston's elite circles like wildfire. Brad and Rebecca's affair was now public knowledge, their attempts at discretion destroyed. Another message from Frank. Martinez's people spotted at the hospital. They're asking questions about Morrison's access to foundation accounts. Perfect. The criminal element would add pressure from directions Brad couldn't handle. A surgeon with wealthy connections was one thing. A desperate man ducking mob debts was another entirely. James's phone rang again, Mira. The board filed a formal complaint. My team's moving in to secure the foundation's records. And Morrison's reaction? He tried deleting files when the Globe article hit. Our tech team's recovering everything now. He's not very good at covering his tracks. No, James agreed, watching Boston's exclusive restaurants pass by. He never was. The next text came from Emma. Dad, have you seen the news? Mom's not answering her phone. Having lunch with the mayor, he replied. We'll talk tonight. Don't worry about your mother. Emma's response was pure Callahan strength. I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about what she'll try to do next. James smiled. His daughter understood the game better than Rebecca ever had. The safe choice had turned out to be anything but safe for those who'd betrayed him. La Maison's maitre d' greeted him with perfect deference, leading him to a private room where Mayor Collins waited. As James took his seat, his phone displayed another update. Brad Morrison had been suspended from the hospital pending investigation. The storm was gathering strength. Soon, Brad and Rebecca would learn the true cost of underestimating James Callahan. Chapter 5. Countermoves. Rebecca's hands trembled as she paced the marble foyer of her parents' Beacon Hill mansion. The Boston Globe article about Brad's embezzlement had exploded through their social circles, followed quickly by viral photos of their secret meetings. Their careful fiction of mere friendship had shattered. How could you be so stupid? Eleanor Montgomery's voice cut like crystal. Stealing from a children's cancer charity? What were you thinking? I didn't steal anything. Rebecca protested. That was all Brad. I didn't know. But you knew he was gambling. William Montgomery's normally ruddy face had gone pale. You knew he was in trouble, and you said nothing. I thought I could help him. Rebecca sank onto a Louis XIV chair. The trust fund, which is now frozen pending criminal investigation. William's hands clenched into fists. Do you have any idea what this will do to our family's reputation? Eleanor paced the room, her Hermes scarf fluttering. We have to get ahead of this. Issue a statement distancing ourselves from Morrison. Make it clear you were manipulated. What about James? Rebecca's voice cracked. He has to be behind this. The timing. James? William barked out a harsh laugh. The simple contractor you never thought was good enough? He's having lunch with the mayor right now, while your lover is being investigated for stealing from sick children. Rebecca's phone buzzed. Another call from Brad. She'd stopped answering after their fight at the apartment. His messages had grown increasingly desperate as the day wore on. What are we going to do? She whispered. Eleanor's face hardened. We are going to salvage what we can of the Montgomery name. You're going to file for divorce before James does. And claim what? William interjected. That her affair with a gambling addict who stole from charity was James's fault? Exactly. Eleanor's eyes glittered. We'll say James was controlling, abusive. That he drove her to seek comfort elsewhere. It's our only play. Rebecca's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Emma. I know everything. Don't try to contact me. Tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks. Emma, she's another problem. Eleanor began typing on her phone. We'll file for emergency custody. Claim James is unstable, dangerous. He'll fight it. Of course he will. Eleanor's smile was sharp. But the courts favor mothers, and we still have some influence. The right judges, the right experts. William cleared his throat. That influence may be limited now. The Hospital Foundation scandal. Our name is toxic. Then we'll use that. Eleanor whirled on her husband. Paint James as the mastermind. Say he set Brad up, manipulated everything to destroy Rebecca's reputation. Rebecca's hands shook as she pulled up her banking apps. Every account showed the same message. Access restricted pending investigation. Her American Express card had been declined at Neiman Marcus that morning. Her first hint that something was wrong. Then the trust fund notification had come, followed by the Globe article. Now her entire world was imploding. Brad had sworn he could fix everything. Said he just needed time, money, someone named Martinez to be patient. She believed him, just like she'd believed his promises about leaving his wife in college. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Massachusetts General Hospital suspends prominent surgeon amid financial investigation. The article mentioned Brad's gambling debts, his connection to organized crime figures, and his misuse of charitable funds. It also highlighted his recent personal relationship with Rebecca Montgomery Callahan, daughter of prominent Boston family. They can't print that, she gasped. It's already trending. Eleanor snatched the phone. Twitter, Facebook, those photos of you two are everywhere. What photos? Eleanor thrust the phone back. Rebecca's hands trembled as she swiped through images of her and Brad entering the Grandview, sharing intimate moments at restaurants, looking very much like the adulterers they were. James, she whispered. He must have had us followed. Of course he did. William roared. Did you think he was actually that oblivious? That man built a construction empire from nothing. He doesn't miss details. Rebecca's mind raced through recent memories. James's late nights at the office, his mysterious phone calls, the way he'd seemed almost amused by her excuses for visiting the hospital. He's been planning this, she realized. All of it, and you handed him everything he needed. Eleanor's voice dripped contempt. The affair, the trust fund access, even Emma's paternity. Rebecca's head snapped up. How did you? It's in the divorce petition his lawyers just filed. William waved a thick envelope. Along with evidence of your affair, Brad's criminal activities, and your involvement in his financial schemes. I wasn't involved. You gave him access to your trust fund. William's face was thunderous. Money he used to pay gambling debts while stealing from charity. The optics alone. Rebecca's phone buzzed yet again. Brad's message made her blood run cold. Martinez's men are looking for me. I need money now. Who's Martinez? Eleanor demanded, reading over her shoulder. Brad's bookie, apparently. Rebecca's voice sounded distant to her own ears. He said he owed some people money. William grabbed the phone. A bookie? You got involved with a surgeon who owes money to bookies? He said he could handle it. Rebecca's composure cracked. He just needed help with a few payments until the hospital situation improved. The hospital situation? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You knew about the foundation money? Not everything. Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself. He said there were cash flow issues, investment opportunities. I didn't know he was actually stealing. William's face had gone from pale to gray. How much of your trust fund went to pay his gambling debts? I don't, maybe $500,000? Rebecca whispered. He promised to pay it back. The sound of shattering crystal made her jump. Eleanor had thrown a baccarat vase against the wall. $500,000? Her mother screamed. To pay a bookie? Martinez isn't just a bookie. William was reading something on his phone. He runs one of the biggest illegal gambling operations in New England. Connected to organized crime. Rebecca's phone lit up with another message from Brad. They're saying you knew about the foundation money. Did you tell someone? I didn't know. She typed back frantically. I swear. Then why is James Callahan having lunch with the mayor while my life falls apart? Rebecca stared at the message, remembering James's expression the morning after her drunken confession. She'd mistaken his calm for shock, his silence for weakness. Now she understood. She'd simply given him the excuse he needed to strike. We need a lawyer, Eleanor announced. Someone who can spin this properly. Paint you as the victim of both Brad's manipulation and James's revenge. James has evidence, William reminded her. Real evidence, not just spin. Then we'll fight fire with fire. Eleanor's jaw set. Rebecca called Dr. Walsh. We need Emma's therapist to document James's controlling behavior. Rebecca's laugh held an edge of hysteria. Dr. Walsh won't help. She knows everything. What do you mean, everything? Emma's been telling her about the affair for months. Showing her evidence, she collected herself. William sank into a chair. Your daughter was gathering evidence against you? She's just like him. Rebecca's voice broke. Everyone thinks James is the safe, steady one. But he's not. He's the most dangerous man I've ever met. Her phone chimed with a final message from Brad. Martinez knows about us. Says you're as responsible as I am. God help us both. Rebecca looked up at her parents, seeing their carefully maintained world crumbling around them. What have I done? You've destroyed everything, Eleanor said flatly. Now we have to see what we can save from the wreckage. Outside the mansion's windows, reporters had begun to gather. The Montgomery name, once a shield against scandal, now acted as a beacon drawing media attention. Rebecca's phone buzzed one last time, a message from James. You wanted Brad. You got him. Enjoy the consequences. She stared at her phone, finally understanding the full magnitude of her mistake. James hadn't been safe at all. He'd been a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Chapter 6. Desperate Hours. Brad Morrison paced the confined space of his Back Bay apartment, panic rising in his throat as he watched his life implode through the relentless scroll of news updates on his phone. The hospital board suspension had been just the beginning. Now federal investigators were combing through his financial records, and Danny Martinez's men were asking questions he couldn't answer. His phone rang, Martinez's personal number. Brad's hands shook as he answered. Danny, I can explain. Save it. Martinez's voice was ice. You've been playing both sides, document. Using charity money to pay gambling debts while negotiating with my competition. That's not. Someone sent proof. Screenshots of your conversations with Joey Ventura's crew. Think they'll be more understanding than me. Brad sank onto his leather couch, bought with stolen foundation funds. I can fix this. Rebecca's trust fund is frozen pending criminal investigation. Martinez's laugh held no humor. You really think James Callahan didn't plan for that? The mention of James's name sent a chill down Brad's spine. What do you know about Callahan? I know he's having lunch with the mayor while my boys watch you sweat. I know he's got enough evidence to bury you 10 times over. And I know you're out of time. Please, you need a miracle document. And I ain't in that business. The line went dead. Brad's phone immediately lit up with another call. Rebecca, they're freezing my accounts. Her voice held raw panic. The foundation money, the gambling. It's all over the news. Your husband's behind this. Brad ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He must have been gathering evidence for weeks. Months, Rebecca corrected. Emma, she knew. She was helping him collect proof. Emma. Brad's gut churned. The daughter he'd never claimed, now turned spy against her own mother. Does she know about the DNA? Yes. James made sure of that, too. A sharp knock at the door made Brad jump. Through the peephole, he saw two of Martinez's enforcers in expensive suits. I have to go, he whispered into the phone. Don't call for a while. The enforcers' faces held professional detachment as they entered. No weapons visible, but their message was clear in their stance. Mr. Martinez is concerned about the attention you're bringing to his business interests, the taller one stated. The police investigation, Brad stammered. The hospital board will be the least of your problems if you don't make this right. The shorter enforcer smiled without warmth. You have 24 hours to deliver the outstanding balance. $2 million? That's impossible. My accounts are frozen. Not our problem, document clock's ticking. After they left, Brad called the one person who might still help, his lawyer, David Chen. It's worse than we thought, Chen said without preamble. Callahan's team didn't just document the affair. They've got proof you falsified medical records to cover gambling losses. What proof? Dates of procedures that never happened. Insurance claims for phantom surgeries. The foundation money was just the start. Brad's medical license. His career. Everything he'd built. Destroyed because he'd underestimated James Callahan's capacity for revenge. Can you fight it? Fight what? Chen's laugh was bitter. The federal investigation? The hospital board? Martinez's organization? Or your lover's husband, who apparently has half of Boston's power players in his pocket? There has to be something. There's nothing left to fight with. Your reputation is destroyed, your assets are frozen, and you've got organized crime breathing down your neck. My advice? Run. Run far and fast. Brad ended the call and stared at his reflection in the apartment's windows. The distinguished surgeon had vanished, replaced by a haunted man facing total destruction. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. My parents are filing emergency custody papers, claiming James is unstable, dangerous. Brad barked out a harsh laugh. James Callahan, the calculating destroyer of lives, would eat them alive in court. Another knock at the door, this time Detective Mira Rodriguez, flanked by two uniformed officers. Dr. Morrison. Myra's badge glinted as she held up a warrant. Financial Crimes Division. We need to discuss some irregularities in the hospital foundation's accounts. I want my lawyer present. Already called him. Myra's smile was predatory. He's meeting us at the station, along with representatives from the FBI's white-collar crime unit. As the officers let him out, Brad's phone lit up with one final message from James Callahan himself. You took my wife and daughter. I took your entire life. Fair trade? In the police car, Brad finally understood. He hadn't just had an affair with a wealthy man's wife. He'd challenged a force of nature, a man who'd built an empire from nothing and would burn the world to protect what was his. The safe choice had proven to be anything but safe. And Brad Morrison's desperate hour was only beginning. Chapter 7. The Fall of Brad Morrison. Brad Morrison's final downfall began with a single email. The message hit the FBI's Financial Crimes Division at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, containing detailed records of offshore accounts filled with embezzled hospital foundation money. By noon, federal agents had seized his office at Massachusetts General Hospital. By dinner, his face dominated local news broadcasts as reporters detailed his theft from children's cancer research funds. Dr. Morrison, an FBI agent, stood in his office doorway, warrant in hand. We need you to step away from the computer. Brad's fingers froze over the keyboard, where he'd been frantically attempting to delete incriminating files. I can explain. Save it for your lawyer. The agent nodded to her team. Secure everything. Each drive, each document. His phone buzzed Danny Martinez's number. Brad let it go to voicemail, knowing what awaited him. The unmarked envelope Martinez had received that morning contained proof of Brad's negotiations with rival gambling operations. His attempt to play different criminal organizations against each other had backfired spectacularly. Your personal devices too, Dr. Morrison. Another agent held out an evidence bag. Phone, tablet, laptop. Brad handed them over, his surgeon's hands trembling. Through his office windows, he could see reporters gathering in the hospital parking lot. His colleagues averted their eyes as federal agents boxed up years of medical records. His office phone rang, the hospital board chairman. Brad, Richard Holbrook's voice dripped contempt. The board has voted. Your privileges are permanently revoked, effective immediately. Richard, please. $2 million, Brad. From Pediatric Cancer Research. Do you know how many children those funds could have helped? The line went dead as two more FBI agents entered, carrying boxes of financial records from the foundation office. Dr. Morrison? A junior agent approached. We found some irregularities in your surgical records. Several procedures billed to insurance that don't match hospital schedules. Brad sank into his chair. The fraudulent surgeries, a desperate attempt to generate cash for Martinez's payments. Each false insurance claim, now another nail in his coffin. His cell phone lit up with a text from Rebecca. The Globe is calling my parents. What did you do with the foundation money? Before he could respond, Martinez's message arrived. You played both sides document. Big mistake. Check your email. The email contained photos. Brad meeting with representatives from Joey Ventura's rival gambling operation. The timestamp showed Martinez's people had been watching him for weeks. A commotion in the hallway drew his attention. Local news crews had breached hospital security, cameras rolling as they approached his office. Dr. Morrison, can you comment on allegations of embezzlement? What happened to the cancer research funds? Is it true you used charity money to pay gambling debts? The FBI agents formed a barrier, but the damage was done. His face would lead tonight's news, his crimes exposed for all to see. Another text from Rebecca. My father's lawyer says they're freezing all my accounts. Says you implicated me in the foundation theft. Tell me that's not true. Brad's hands shook as he typed. I needed your trust fund access. Martinez was threatening. You used me? All of this. The affair, the promises. It was about money. I loved you, but the debts? Go to hell. The FBI agent in charge approached his desk. Dr. Morrison, we'll need you to come with us. The U.S. attorney has some questions about these offshore transactions. Brad stood on unsteady legs, watching his career, reputation, and freedom crumble around him. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of James Callahan walking to his car, briefcase in hand. Their eyes met for a moment. James's cold and triumphant, Brad's filled with dawning horror. The safe choice husband had orchestrated this destruction. Each piece of evidence, each damning revelation, time for maximum impact. We should go, Dr. Morrison. The agent's hand gripped his elbow. Unless you prefer to be arrested in front of the cameras? Brad took one last look at his office. At 15 years of medical practice reduced to evidence boxes and crime scene tape. His phone buzzed one final time, a message from Martinez. Running won't help document. But feel free to try. The next hours passed in a blur of interrogation rooms and mounting charges. The U.S. attorney's evidence was overwhelming. Not just the foundation theft, but years of fraudulent insurance claims, falsified medical records, and money laundering through offshore accounts. His lawyer arrived looking grim. They have everything, Brad. Bank records, hospital documents, even recordings of your conversations with Martinez's people. How? Someone's been building this case for months. Recording everything, documenting each transaction. The lawyer shuffled his papers. Someone very thorough, very patient, and very motivated to destroy you. Brad thought of James Callahan's cold eyes in the hospital parking lot. Can you give me a deal? With which agency? The feds? The state? The medical board? Or the criminals you tried to double-cross? A detective entered the interrogation room. Mira Rodriguez from Financial Crimes. Dr. Morrison. She laid out photos of his meetings with Martinez's operators. Want to explain these payments? $2 million in embezzled charity funds, routed through your lover's trust fund accounts. I want immunity. From what? Federal charges? State charges? Or Danny Martinez's organization? Myra's smile held no warmth. Because right now, you're facing all three. Brad's phone sat on the table, screen constantly lighting up with messages from Rebecca, the hospital board, reporters seeking comment. Each one another nail in his professional coffin. I need protection, he whispered. Martinez's people are the least of your problems. Mira pushed a document across the table. The medical board is suspending your license pending investigation. The hospital's insurance company is filing fraud charges. And the IRS has some questions about those offshore accounts. Brad stared at his ruined hands, once steady enough for delicate cardiac surgery, now trembling like a junkie's. James Callahan did this. Did he force you to steal from sick children? Make you falsify medical records? Compel you to sleep with his wife while using her money to pay gambling debts? Each question hit like a physical blow. Brad saw his future dissolving. No license, no practice, no reputation. Just federal charges and mob enforcers waiting to collect their due. His lawyer touched his arm. Brad, they're offering a deal. Full cooperation against Martinez's organization in exchange for consideration on the federal charges. Martinez will kill me. You should have thought of that before stealing from children with cancer. Mira stood. You have an hour to decide. After that, we go public with everything. Brad's phone lit up with a final message from James Callahan. Consequences, Dr. Morrison. Time to pay them. In that moment, Brad Morrison, respected surgeon, trusted physician, pillar of Boston society, broke. The facade crumbled, revealing the desperate coward beneath. He ran. Using his last clean credit card, he booked a flight to Miami. But he never made it to the airport. Martinez's men were waiting at his apartment, their message delivered with professional brutality. When Brad regained consciousness in the emergency room of his own hospital, he found federal agents outside his door and his medical license permanently revoked. His attempt to flee had only accelerated his downfall. The next morning's Boston Globe carried his story on the front page. Prominent surgeon charged in multi-million-dollar charity fraud. Below the headline, a photo showed him being led from the hospital in handcuffs. His distinguished career ended in disgrace. James Callahan read the article over breakfast, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. The man who tried to steal his family had lost everything: career, freedom, reputation. The price of betrayal, paid in full. Chapter 8. Rebecca's Awakening. Rebecca Montgomery Callahan stared at the eviction notice taped to her apartment door, reality finally piercing her privileged bubble. The trust fund that had cushioned her entire life was gone, drained through a series of high-risk investments that had somehow aligned perfectly with Brad's legal troubles. Inside, her few remaining possessions sat in moving boxes, designer clothes and luxury items she could no longer afford to keep. The diamond necklace James had given her was gone, disappeared along with her credit cards and remaining cash. Her phone rang. Eleanor Montgomery, calling for the third time that day. Mother, please. Don't mother me. Eleanor's voice crackled with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? Your father can barely show his face at the club. I didn't know about Brad's gambling. You knew enough. Running around with a married man, giving him access to your trust fund, letting him drag our name into his criminal schemes. Rebecca sank onto a packing box. I thought he loved me. Loves. Eleanor barked out a harsh laugh. He loved your money, your social connections, your ability to help him avoid Martinez's enforcers. And now he's disappeared, leaving you to face the consequences alone. James did this, Rebecca whispered. He planned it all. James? Eleanor's voice dripped acid. The safe choice you never thought was good enough? While you were playing adulteress with a gambling addict, your husband was building an empire. Now he's taking over the hospital foundation, turning it into a legitimate charitable operation. He's being hailed as a savior while we're social pariahs. Rebecca's phone beeped with an incoming text, Emma's first message in months. Her heart leapt until she read the contents. A formal letter, coldly detailing years of observed betrayal and manipulation. Your affair wasn't a surprise, Emma wrote. I watched you lie to Dad for months. Watched you sneak around with Brad, using the trust fund Dad managed to finance your lover's gambling addiction. You threw away our family for a man who stole from sick children. Rebecca's hands shook as she typed a response. Emma, please. I'm still your mother. The reply came instantly. No. A mother protects her family. You destroyed ours. Dad raised me, loved me, taught me strength and loyalty. Biology doesn't make a parent. Character does. Eleanor's voice cut through her grief. Emma's refused to see us too. Another bridge you've burned. I need help, Mother. Money for an apartment, just until what? Until Brad returns with his stolen millions? Until James forgives you? Until your reputation magically restores itself? I have nowhere to go. You have exactly what you chose. Eleanor's voice turned cold. Your father and I are moving to Palm Beach. The scandal, we can't stay in Boston. Don't contact us until this blows over. The line went dead. Rebecca stared at her phone, watching as each social media notification brought more bad news. Friends unfriending her. Club memberships revoked. Party invitations rescinded. A knock at the door made her jump. The building manager stood there, face stern. Mrs. Callahan, your credit card was declined. Without payment, you'll need to vacate by Friday. I can get the money. From where? He handed her another notice. Your husband's lawyers have been clear. The apartment lease is terminated. After he left, Rebecca opened her banking apps. Each account showed the same message. Access restricted pending investigation. Her American Express Black Card, a symbol of Montgomery family status, had been canceled. She tried calling Brad again, but his number was disconnected. His hospital office phone went straight to voicemail. His email bounced back undelivered. In desperation, she called James's office. Callahan Construction. I need to speak with James. I'm sorry, Mrs. Callahan. Mr. Callahan has instructed us not to put through your calls. Please, it's an emergency. Your emergencies are no longer Mr. Callahan's concern. Good day. Rebecca sank onto the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her life. The designer clothes seemed to mock her now. Physical proof of the privileged existence she'd taken for granted. Her phone lit up with a news alert. Disgraced surgeon's lover linked to charity fraud. The article detailed her role in Brad's schemes, painting her as either a willing accomplice or a fool who'd enabled his crimes. Another text arrived from James. You made your choice 13 years ago. Live with it, the words struck deeper than any physical blow. She'd chosen Brad, the exciting surgeon who'd turned out to be a criminal fraud. She'd rejected James, the safe choice who'd proven to be a ruthless force of nature. Now she understood what real power looked like. Not Brad's superficial charm or her family's social status, but James's quiet, relentless strength. He hadn't just destroyed her affair. He dismantled her entire world. Chapter 9. Phoenix Rising. 1 year after Rebecca's drunken confession, James Callahan stood in his newly renovated kitchen, watching Emma chop vegetables for dinner. The room buzzed with warmth and life, so different from the cold perfection Rebecca had insisted upon. Dad? Emma's voice held a touch of concern. You're thinking about Mom again? James smiled at his daughter, his in all ways that mattered. Just appreciating what we have now. The doorbell rang, announcing Mira Rodriguez's arrival for their weekly dinner. She'd become a regular presence in their lives, her straight-talking nature a refreshing change from Boston society's polite deceptions. Something smells amazing, Mira called out, hanging up her detective's badge. Please tell me it's your lasagna. Emma's recipe actually, James replied. She's becoming quite the chef. The kitchen filled with comfortable conversation as they prepared the meal together. James's company had expanded, absorbing the hospital's charitable foundation and transforming it into a model of transparency and effective giving. The foundation's new pediatric wing opens next month, he mentioned, passing Mira a glass of wine. Full funding for childhood cancer research. Quite a change from Morrison's days, Mira noted. Speaking of which, he's taking a plea deal. Full cooperation against Martinez's organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. James nodded, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. And Rebecca? Left Boston last week. Her parents cut her off completely. Seems the Montgomery fortune took some hits in recent market movements. Emma's knife paused over the cutting board. Did you orchestrate their financial troubles too, Dad? The market can be unpredictable. James's face revealed nothing, especially when certain investment advisors receive anonymous tips about risk factors. The doorbell rang again, this time announcing Michael Callahan, James's father. The former Navy SEAL had moved back to Boston, his military discipline and quiet strength providing another layer of support to their reconstructed family. "Grandpa!" Emma rushed to hug him. "Did you bring the photos?" Michael pulled out an album, old pictures of James as a child, learning construction at his father's side. Thought it was time for some family history lessons. They gathered around the kitchen island, looking through photographs that traced the Callahan line's journey from working-class builders to Boston power players. "Your father was always different," Michael told Emma. "Quiet strength, they called it, but I knew it was more. The kind of strength that builds empires or burns them down. Is that why Mom's family thought he was safe?" Emma asked. "Because he seemed quiet? They mistook patience for weakness." Michael's military bearing softened as he smiled at his granddaughter. "A mistake your mother and Brad Morrison won't make again." Mira raised her glass. "To patience, then, and consequences, and family," Emma added. "The real kind." James watched his daughter, so much his own strength reflected in her face. The DNA test that had revealed Brad's biological connection meant nothing compared to the bonds they'd forged through loyalty and love. The diamond necklace that had sparked everything now sat in a safe deposit box, along with other evidence of Brad and Rebecca's crimes. Insurance against any future attempts to disrupt the life he'd rebuilt from betrayal's ashes. His phone buzzed with a news alert. The Hospital Foundation stock had risen again, his management bringing stability and growth where Brad's theft had caused chaos. Another piece of vindication, another victory in the quiet war he'd waged. The kitchen filled with laughter as Emma shared a story from school, her voice carrying the same steady confidence that had helped James rise from job sites to boardrooms. She was his legacy now, not the daughter of his blood, but of his spirit. "You did good, son," Michael murmured, watching Emma with pride. "Show them what Callahan's strength really means." James nodded, satisfaction settling deep in his bones. They'd called him the safe choice, the steady husband, the reliable backup plan. They'd never understood that still waters run deep, that quiet strength could become devastating power when provoked. The price of betrayal had been paid in full. Brad Morrison would spend years in prison, his medical career destroyed, his reputation in ruins. Rebecca had lost everything: money, status, family, even her daughter's love. The Montgomery name carried the stain of scandal, their social position crumbling like the facades of power they'd hidden behind. And James Callahan, the safe choice, had emerged stronger. His company thrived, his influence grew, and his real family, bound by loyalty rather than blood or society's expectations, flourished in the aftermath of destruction. The diamond necklace would stay locked away, a reminder that some debts can only be paid in full measure. The price of betrayal, extracted with the same quiet strength that had built his empire. Epilogue, 10 years later. The Boston Globe's business section headline read, "Callahan Group acquires 10th Hospital, revolutionizing healthcare charity model." James Callahan set the paper aside in his expanded office overlooking the city's skyline, a satisfied gleam in his eyes. At 52, his hair had traces of distinguished gray, but his presence remained as formidable as ever. His empire had grown far beyond construction. After transforming the Massachusetts General Hospital Foundation into a model of efficiency and transparency, he'd systematically acquired troubled hospital charitable organizations across New England. Each acquisition followed the same pattern: identify mismanagement, step in as a savior, and rebuild with ruthless effectiveness. "Mr. Callahan?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your daughter's here." Emma Callahan strode in, 25 now, and every inch her father's daughter. Her law degree from Harvard hung on James's office wall alongside her MBA. She'd refused to trade on the Callahan name, working her way up through Boston's top firms before joining her father's company as chief legal officer. "The Milton Hospital acquisition is ready," she announced, setting a thick folder on his desk. "Their board didn't stand a chance against our proposal." James smiled with pride. Emma had inherited his strategic mind and unforgiving nature, becoming a feared negotiator in Boston's corporate world. The truth about her biological father had only strengthened their bond, proving that character meant more than DNA. Any complications? Nothing we couldn't handle. Emma's smile mirrored his own. Though you might be interested in one detail, Brad Morrison tried applying for a position there last month. James raised an eyebrow. Did he now? Under a different name. 8 years in federal prison apparently taught him some creativity. She pulled out a document. He's been working as a medical consultant since his release, trying to rebuild some kind of career. And now he's blacklisted from every hospital in New England. Emma's voice held no mercy. I made sure his complete history reached their HR department. No one will risk hiring a convicted embezzler who stole from children's cancer research. James nodded approvingly. They'd watched Brad's downfall from afar. His plea deal, his prison term, his desperate attempts to salvage some piece of his former life. The man who'd tried to destroy their family now lived in a small apartment in Providence, scraping by on consultation fees and medical writing work. Any word from your mother? Emma's face hardened. She tried reaching out last month. Another plea for reconciliation. I had her messages blocked. Rebecca's fall had been complete. After leaving Boston, she drifted between smaller cities, attempting to rebuild some semblance of her former life. But James's influence ran deep, and doors kept closing. The Montgomery family had never recovered their social position, retiring to Palm Beach as virtual exiles from Boston society. Detective Rodriguez called. James mentioned, Danny Martinez is being released next month. Emma looked up sharply. The man who handled Brad's gambling debts? The same, though his organization didn't survive Brad's testimony. 10 years in prison broke his hold on Boston's gambling operations. Think he'll cause problems? James's smile turned cold. Martinez understands the new order. His replacement knows who really runs this city. The intercom buzzed again. Mr. Callahan? Michael's here with Mrs. Rodriguez. Mira entered with James's father, their wedding rings glinting. They'd married 5 years ago, their shared understanding of justice and consequences creating a bond that surprised no one who knew them well. The Milton deal's done? Mira asked, her detective's instincts still sharp despite her promotion to commissioner of police. Emma handled it, James confirmed. The Callahan Group now controls charitable operations for most major hospitals in New England. Michael Callahan, still carrying his military bearing at 70, settled into a chair. Any pushback from the medical establishment? None they'd risk expressing. Emma's smile was razor-sharp. Our foundations have the highest efficiency ratings in the country. 95% of donations reach actual patients. Unlike Brad Morrison's day, Mira noted. Speaking of which, his parole officer called. He's requested permission to return to Massachusetts. Denied, I assume? James's voice held no question. Of course, his crimes against children's medical care make him permanently unwelcome in the state. The Callahan Group's influence extended far beyond business now. James had built a network of power that touched every aspect of Boston life. Construction, healthcare, politics, law enforcement. All managed with the same quiet strength that had once been mistaken for weakness. Emma checked her phone. The Robinson Foundation board meets in an hour. Another troubled hospital charity looking for salvation. Take Harrison with you, James instructed. He's earned partnership status with his loyalty. Harrison had risen from driver to key executive, his unwavering dedication during the Brad Morrison affair proving his worth. James rewarded loyalty above all else, building his inner circle from those who'd stood with him during the darkest times. Did you see last week's society pages? Mira asked, passing over a magazine. Rebecca made an appearance at a Palm Beach charity event. The photo showed a woman desperately clinging to past glory. Rebecca's attempt to maintain her socialite status in Florida's wealthy enclaves had met limited success. The scandal of her affair with Brad and their connection to stolen charity funds had followed her south. She tried contacting Emma again, James mentioned. Myra's face hardened. Still doesn't understand actions have consequences. Something she never learned from the Montgomerys. Michael's military assessment was precise. That family confused social position with actual power. Emma gathered her files, her Harvard law ring catching the light. The Montgomery name means nothing now. Dad made sure of that. The systematic dismantling of the Montgomery family's influence had been a masterpiece of patient revenge. Investment mistakes had eroded their fortune. Whispered rumors had destroyed their social connections. William and Eleanor lived as virtual recluses in their Palm Beach mansion, their once mighty name reduced to cautionary gossip at country clubs. The new pediatric cancer wing opens next month, Emma mentioned. The press wants a statement from the family. The wing would be the crowning achievement of James's Hospital Foundation work. Funded entirely by legitimate donations, it would provide cutting-edge treatment to children regardless of their family's ability to pay. Your mother's ghost finally exorcised? Mira asked quietly. There was never anything to exorcise. James's voice held absolute conviction. Rebecca was a chapter in a much longer story. The real story was always about building something lasting. Michael nodded proudly. The Callahan legacy. Emma's phone buzzed with another message. Brad's trying to apply for medical consulting work in Connecticut now. Handle it, James instructed simply. Already done? Emma's smile matched her father's. His detailed history will reach their licensing board tomorrow. No state in New England will risk their medical reputation by accepting him. The destruction of Brad Morrison hadn't ended with his prison term. Each attempt to rebuild his life met invisible barriers, his criminal past emerging at crucial moments to deny him any foothold in the medical community. Martinez asked about him during his exit interview, Mira mentioned. Seemed amused that the high-end mighty surgeon who caused his downfall is now writing patient education materials for pharmaceutical companies. Karma, Michael noted with military satisfaction. Or justice. James stood and walked to the windows overlooking his city. The Callahan Group's newest tower dominated the skyline, a physical testament to the empire he'd built from betrayal's ashes. The board meeting's in 10 minutes, Emma reminded him. They'll want to review the Milton acquisition details. The boardroom would be full of men and women who owed their positions to James's patronage. Like his father's military unit, he'd built an organization based on absolute loyalty and shared purpose. Harrison says the Providence Hospital Board is vulnerable, Emma continued. Their foundation's showing similar issues to Mass General 10 years ago. History repeating itself? Mira raised an eyebrow. History teaching its lessons. James turned from the windows. Some people learn from others' mistakes. Some have to learn personally. The intercom buzzed one final time. Mr. Callahan? A message from Palm Beach. Rebecca Montgomery Callahan is trying to reach you. James exchanged glances with Emma, seeing his own steel reflected in her eyes. No response necessary. Some chapters stay closed. 10 years had transformed the safe choice into Boston's most powerful figure. The quiet strength that Rebecca and Brad had mistaken for weakness had remade the city's medical, business, and social landscapes. The diamond necklace remained in its safe deposit box, along with evidence of past crimes and betrayals. James never looked at it anymore. Like Rebecca, like Brad, like the Montgomerys, it belonged to a finished chapter. The Callahan Group's new tower caught the sunlight, its windows gleaming with promise rather than reflection. Inside its offices, deals were made, power was brokered, and consequences were arranged. Shall we? Emma gestured toward the boardroom. Time to add another hospital to the family. James nodded, pride warming his chest. His daughter, in spirit if not blood, had learned his most valuable lesson. True power comes not from social position or professional titles, but from the patient strength to build empires and destroy enemies. The safe choice had proven to be anything but safe for those who betrayed him. But for those who remained loyal, who understood the value of family and consequences, James Callahan had built something extraordinary from betrayal's wreckage. In the end, the price of betrayal hadn't just been paid. It had been transformed into an empire built on the ruins of those who dared underestimate a quiet man's strength. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.